Well, really, the reason I first got in contact was, I've been suffering for just the last few years with anxiety and stress, mainly related to work, quite high intensity work environment, but also that was compounded a bit with, sort of grief from my dad passing away, and that just made the stress a lot worse. I started sort of suffering with anxiety attacks, and earlier in this year I was going through quite a period of high intensity anxiety and quite a lot of sleeplessness, so I decided to go and see the doctor about it. I hadn't actually heard of ACT at all before we first met, other than the doctors when I went to see them and talked about my symptoms, and he recommended some sort of treatment. I'd seen some counsellors before. He also recommended CBT, and he recommended ACT. I hadn't heard of it before, but it seemed interesting, so I thought I'd book a session and see how it worked out. I suppose the main thing that stayed with me when you first introduced ACT was that it was really grounded in mindfulness practice, and I've been practicing mindfulness type meditation for quite a few years, and I guess the other thing that really stuck with me was you were sort of describing how ACT was slightly different to CBT, which I'd heard of before, and the fact that in CBT you can get into a bit of a sort of struggle switch type mode, which you describe as sort of continually trying to get rid of difficult feelings and emotions, and this was sort of the alternative of it. It was trying to just accept and deal with the difficult thoughts and feelings as they were, and I suppose those are the main things that stuck with me. I think the main thing that appealed to me about ACT was that it was really based in mindfulness practice that suited my background and my previous experiences, and also I think that it just didn't it wasn't orientated around trying to sort of get rid of negative feelings and emotions. It was around just trying to sort of deal with them as they were, and that seemed very appealing. And the other thing I suppose was that it was very much a sort of practical based therapy. I've seen a few counsellors before, and you'd just been talking about things and you could never really remember what they were saying, and it sort of just go from one session to the other. But the fact that it seemed to be quite grounded in a practical type approaches seemed really appealing. I don't think there was anything that really felt off-putting. I suppose again that really sort of struck quite true with me. Again, my sort of previous meditation experience had been around just trying to live with the current experiences, not try to sort of get away from them too much, and it just felt like a natural thing to do, really. And I really understood that actually you can cause yourself quite a bit more anxiety by really trying to push yourself away, push your symptoms away from you too much. I mean, there was a part of my mind that was sort of thinking paradoxically, how I come in to talk to someone because I'm feeling not very well, and actually I want to get rid of the symptoms, and so it's quite difficult to make your mind adjust to that. But I think I had a bit of experience through the meditation practice where I actually knew that was quite true. If you sort of try to detach yourself from these things, and they can just let themselves go anyway. So I just felt I had to sort of trust the technique and what I was being told, and really just give it a go. I suppose it took a while to get a sense of the main ideas of ACT. Probably around between sort of session 5 and 6, something like that. There's quite a few different parts of it. There's quite a bit of complexity can be there under the surface, and I think that was right. It was right not to try and understand all of it too quickly, and just work through in your own pace from one session to the next. I think one of the first concepts or ideas that Victoria introduced was just around this idea of fusion. And the way she sort of described it was that you've got, as you feel it now, your thoughts are just completely part of your experience. They're sort of surrounding you completely. So she sort of drew a picture of a little person with the thoughts all the way around the person's head, and trying to explain that is generally how people feel. They can't sort of distinguish themselves between their thoughts and any other part of their experience. Then she drew another picture, which was the sort of person with the thought bubble above the person's mind, above the person's head, and that it is separate. The person's thoughts are not just who they are. There is some separation between the two, and I think that first description really helped. I think that the second one, really key metaphor for me, was the one about the mountain peak and the sort of clouds around it, to try and get across the understanding that there is something a bit more solid inside your mind that is not just the thoughts whirling around, and people often think that their thoughts are themselves, or the self is thoughts. And there's this idea in ACT that was described as self as context, and I found that quite a difficult concept to understand just from looking at the words, and the way it was explained was that the self is like the mountain peak, very solid and stable, and you have the clouds sort of swirling around. It might be very misty, it might be covered in clouds someday, and you can't really distinguish the two, but it is always there. And then other times it's very clear, you might have a few clouds around, might have a few thoughts, but it kept taking me back to the sense that there was something deeper inside your mind that wasn't just your thoughts. And I think that the last one that was really important to me was this metaphor using a video, and the video was a lot of people on the bus, and I think that it was I really am a visual person, and I think a lot of people are, and would sort of respond quite well to that message and how that message is being given, and really it really clicked with me one of the main concepts for ACT, which is about not basically being bullied or thrown around by the difficult thoughts that you have, that actually you have some control over it. But the key point is that it's not about trying to get rid of them, it's about just learning to live with them. And really that metaphor of saying the difficult argumentative person on the back of the bus, the more you try and throw them off the bus, the more likely it is that actually they're going to cause you a lot of trouble. It's going to be very difficult, and they're going to cause you a lot of grief as well. So, to be honest, if you just say to them, right, well, you just stay at the back of the bus and, just don't worry about it, it's going to diffuses the whole situation. And I think actually that's how human beings respond. If you sort of try and diffuse the situation and don't get confrontational about it, then it's likely to settle down more than if you try and make a conflict about it. And I think it really helped me understand how the different parts of your mind work in that way, and actually you can diffuse the different parts in that same way, where you're not really sort of putting fuel to the fire, and you're just letting your thoughts be as they are. And I just found that really useful. Actually, it was really good doing experiential exercises. You don't often have the time to actually sit down and just stop and think and just feel and reflect internally about how things are going. And it's actually really, really helpful to have someone talk it through, because when you're trying to do that on your own back at home and you're practicing it, your mind's trying to think of what you're supposed to do, or you've got to do that and then this and that, and it really means that you can't quite get the same benefit or the same power out of the exercise you're doing. So for someone else to do it and go through it it's a relaxing experience, but it's also a really helpful experience. I think one of the first exercises that we went through that really helped with understanding the key concepts was doing the experiential exercise of feeling how those sensations and emotions were in your body, and actually trying to draw them down in some sort of shape. So when you first did that, do it first, and I drew a bit of a strange shape. It was sort of different coloured and quite spiky, and that's how it felt. And it was actually really good to just be able to do something in a session where you're doing something yourself. You're drawing it down using different colours. It's quite a creative way of doing it, and I thought that was really good. And then when we did it a second time, and we sort of tried to diffuse and just expand around those difficult feelings, what it really felt like I wanted to draw was a lot smoother. It was less sharp in colours, and I think that really helped me understand that there is a difference in in how your feelings and especially your body sensations are. They're not just a permanent fixed thing as often we think they are, and just the fact of drawing it and getting quite a different response both times made me think, okay, actually, yeah, it's not a constant thing. Things are continuously changing. So one of the second exercises we did was just sort of working through the feelings and thoughts, and what Victoria was doing is she was sort of writing down what I was telling her about my experience in terms of the thoughts and the feelings and the struggles that I was having, and putting them in maybe in one colour, and then how I was noticing that possibly in another, and then the feelings in another. And just that way of separating those things out was quite clear, especially using the different colours. And the fact that someone else was understanding and being able to write down and what you felt you were feeling was just really helpful. It was really nice to know that someone could understand what experiences you were going through. But also just the process of getting it down in words and her writing it down just really helped you all, like that expression of diffusing you from it. You could see her writing it down. As soon as she wrote it, you thought, well, that's crazy. Why should I feel like that? It's just my mind making stuff up. And that was quite a powerful exercise. So some of the other exercises we were doing, firstly around diffusion, I found really helpful, and trying to sort of conceptualize how to do that is quite difficult. But working through visualization, the thing that worked quite well for me was taking those difficult words and putting them on like a screen of a TV, like credits, I think, of a film sort of going up the screen, and imagining how that would feel, and realizing that, well, actually they're just words and they seem to lose their power. But what I noticed after doing that at home after the previous week, as I was finding it quite difficult, and I was trying to sort of push the words off the top of the screen and almost get rid of them. And I remember back to what she was saying about the sort of the struggle switch type effects, and I brought it back up at the next session, and that feedback really helped. Just going back and talking through and sort of just discussing the concept was really important to make sure you're sort of understanding and on the right track. Another exercise was I found really, really good was to do with the values. And I don't think I've ever really sat down and spent that much time or that much effort really thinking about what my personal values are. Occasionally you might think about it, but the process of going through the exercise of first splitting it out into the 3 groups and then focusing on the main ones was really good. And I think it was really important that she reminded me not to be too rational about it, and just trying to do it intuitively. And I definitely got the most out of it just by doing it in that way, by doing it in an intuitive way. I think if I'd overly rationalised it, it would have given a different response. It wouldn't have been quite as helpful. So I think that was excellent. And getting down to those last 6 values made me think, okay, yeah, I can really work out or orientate my life around this, and how to sort of fit the struggles and difficulties around those values. I think finally that the last exercise that was really also really good was towards the end. Victoria asked me to write down what I thought the key concepts were of ACT, and it was a bit of a discussion, and we as well, but it really helped me understand how much I knew about it, and therefore whether I felt that I knew enough to be able to carry it forward and really implement the type of practices in my daily life, and whether I had to ask more questions about it. And I think me doing it personally, writing it down, was much more valuable than her just doing it, or her giving me a handout or something like that. Well, I think this is, it's a really interesting question, and I was quite interested when Victoria sent me that question. And I have to say, when I read that and I was thinking about it, I don't really feel that there was any sense of the fact that people do have common experiences sort of made my personal experience feel any less valid or valued at all. I think, in fact, it actually was probably more helpful to understand that different people have different experiences, and people also have very similar experiences, and most humans have experiences of difficult thoughts and feelings on a day-to-day basis. And the fact that lots of other people are going through that makes your own issues or anxieties easier to deal with. I think the fact that she always came across in her sessions in quite a compassionate way, an understanding way, and it just definitely felt that she wasn't judging what you were saying, was really helpful in that respect as well, because you felt that your personal experience was being understood, but that was also being linked back to the sort of wider experiences that all humans have. I think I mentioned a analogy that came up in my mind about this to her, which I think she found was quite useful. And I thought that actually it feels like everyone has a mixing board, a sort of sound mixing board with lots of different channels on them, and every human has pretty much the same channels. Everybody can experience that range of very pleasant, very difficult, and very uncomfortable thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And that's the thing that's common between all people, but everyone has an individual mixing board, and all of those different channels and levels can be set in a completely different way. And I think that's what gives people their own personal individual experiences, by just having a different range. And I think that sort of fitted really well with me, and it just sort of really exemplified how sort of powerful some of the concepts and the working out can be. And I definitely found it the most useful, most engaging, most helpful type of therapy sessions I have done to help problems of anxiety and stress and things like that.